Welcome to another episode of 10 Minutes with Sam. This is your host, Anondeeta. Today we have Professor Udayan as our guest and speaker. He is an expert in maritime security, specializing in the Bay of Bengal region. He has authored several well-acclaimed articles and is equally an eloquent speaker. Mr. Das is currently working as a professor of political science at one of the esteemed institutions of India, St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
So we'll do a quick recap of the format of this podcast. It's pretty simple. We have 10 minutes and we'll try to cover as much as possible and also keep the discussion precise and to the point. So without any further ado, let me just get to the first question of this session. Since inception of Obama's pivot to Asia policy, a lot has significantly changed in the global geostrategic scenario, with the regions like the Indo-Pacific gaining utmost importance. For our case, the Bay of Bengal region is at the heart of India's Indo-Pacific strategy, and it kind of acts like India's gateway into the strategic wider waters. So how would you assess this newfound importance of the BOB region vis-a-vis the wider Indo-Pacific?
Right. So for me, and as far as my understanding goes, I believe that Bay of Bengal's importance vis-a-vis the Indo-Pacific or its reimagination is entirely dependent upon the fact that the Bay of Bengal has converted or has been converted into a zone of security. By this, I mean that if you look at a very broad-based understanding of maritime security, you will find that maritime security is broadly about four things, which is national security, marine security, energy security, and finally human security. So if in all those four quarters that you consider, you will find that Bay of Bengal has been transformed or into a zone of security by which its importance has increased manifolds. By national security, obviously, we have seen how India and China are locked in a security dilemma in the region with the other regional actors as well. With regard to marine security, there are lots of concerns with regard to the marine geography of Bay of Bengal. With regard to energy security, we have seen how it has become very increasingly important because of the busy sea lanes of communication, very close relation with relation to the geography of Straits of Malacca. It's also kind of a mirror image to the South China Sea. And finally, human security, which is also a very increasing concern in the region with regard to drug trafficking, maritime terrorism, with regard to human security aspects. So all of these, if you put together, you will find that Bay of Bengal's conversion as a zone of security is something that has created a newfound interest in terms of looking at Bay of Bengal. And all these issues are in some ways connected. They are transnational, they are cross-jurisdictional, and they're also to some extent liminal, which means whatever happens on the sea has an effect on the land, and whatever happens offshore also has an effect on shore. All of these factors have contributed to the rise of so-called the Bay of Bengal because it has become increasingly important as a geostrategic theater, as a geo-economic theater, because of which it has gained a lot of attraction from the littoral states of Indian Ocean region and also from the extra-regional actors, in terms of the fact that one may also say that China's activities in fact has connected the wider Indo-Pacific, which now has come to being, and US is seeking to balance and counterbalance with regard to the other members of the littorals of the Indian Ocean states in terms of meeting out with China in these waters. So that is where I feel that the Bay of Bengal's importance has been heightened over the last few years as a zone of security.
Very likely, like you mentioned about the security aspect and the increasing importance of the BOB region. On that note, I would like your take on the reimagination of India's maritime security policy with the BOB region acting as the focal point.
If you see very traditionally, then this space of Indian Ocean or this region of Bay of Bengal is something that has always been highlighted as India's neighborhood, India's immediate neighborhood, India's arc, India's periphery, sphere of influence. A lot of, let's say, words have been used and phrases have been used to denote the importance of Bay of Bengal. But I see it in terms of three perspectives if you look at India's maritime security when it comes to Bay of Bengal. First is obviously that Bay of Bengal is a theater from which threats might emerge with regard to India's defense, with India's coastline that India has. These threats are obviously in both in capacities of traditional and non-traditional security, in terms of, let's say, threats from the states, as we have seen in terms of the competition with China with regard to this theater. And also there are a host of non-traditional threats in terms of maritime terrorism, in terms of piracy, in terms of other factors that contribute. So that is the first, let's say, the defensive angle to look at the Bay of Bengal region. The second is that in terms of control, if I say, in terms of control, then Bay of Bengal is something that India wants to have a control, because it has maintained this point that its primary arc remains from the Strait of Malacca on one hand to the Strait of Hormuz on the other. And Bay of Bengal is very crucial because India's main archipelago, let's say the Eastern Command, also is in the Bay of Bengal, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And therefore, there is an angle of commanding, or let's say, if I look at it from that perspective, let's say uh, a sense of belonging or command with regard to the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal region, whereby India has invested in terms of its military assets in the east. India has invested in terms of diplomatic relations with regard to all the littoral states. It is trying to boost up its military power projections with regard to Milan, with regard to IONS, with regard to its multilateral factors, multilateral initiatives. Therefore, it seeks to have certain sense of command, a certain sense of control over the Bay of Bengal region, where it feels that this is its sphere of influence. And finally, Bay of Bengal is also very crucial to the geography that has been created by Indian foreign policy with regard to the southeast of Asia, or to the further east. If you see, look east, act east, and then further on, then Bay of Bengal is something that becomes the fulcrum of that. It becomes the centerpiece of its Southeast Asia policy, of Southeast Asia policy. And it becomes also a kind of a mental map which features in terms of the interactions between the East and Africa on the other hand. So, in terms of these diplomatic ventures, in terms of these ideas and geographies that have been created over the last 20, 30 years in Indian foreign policy, Bay of Bengal has gradually acquired a lot of importance, and that is also being shown in terms of its material investment. It's also being shown in terms of the time and again mention of the Bay of Bengal by the Indian political elite, which mentions about the fact that it not only seeks to defend the Bay of Bengal, but also seeks to control it, also seeks to use it as not only a centerpiece, but a springboard as well.
So, because you mentioned about the Chinese security threat specifically, don't you think that apart from military coalitions like the Quad, for example, multilateral bodies built on the ethos of economic or cultural cooperation can have a huge role to play in maintaining an overall balance in the region? If so, what do you think of the prospects or even the future of multilateralism in the BOB region?
See, the problem with multilateralism here is that there are two things that I see. The first is that in terms of coming together as a multilateral grouping, it is very easier to talk on non-traditional security issues. That's a much easier talk to have, and we see that happening all the time in this region. But whereas it concerns the main issues of traditional security, which is state vis-a-vis the state, in those quarters there is very few initiatives that have been taken. Yeah, this is a region which is primarily where the countries are very conservative about their sovereign rights. They're very conservative about the fact that how territoriality on the sea also operates, not only on the land. So in that case, multilateralism stutters in this region. We have seen that there are multiple groupings in this region, be it BCIM, be it Kolkata to Kunming, be it, let's say, other groupings like IONS, IORA. There are multilateral forums which are overlapping one another in this region. But the problem is they fail to converge over some contours of cooperative security. That's number one. Number two, any, let's say, initiative, any multilateral initiative with regard to this region is also very crucial with regard to the connectivity of Bay of Bengal region, which lacks a lot of, let's say, in overland connectivity, and let's say connectivity within the states as well around the region. There, the problem is that economic or geo-economic connectivity is also seen from a very strategic point of view in this region. So it is not that sections lead the way and the politics follows. Rather, it's the other way around that makes it problematic for multilateral organizations to function. So BCIM could have easily functioned, but don't see what? We don't see India and China cooperating, as a result of which the multilateral organizations are torn apart. So we have many regional organizations, but they don't confront the problem of traditional security, or let's say cooperative security imagination on one hand, and their idea of connectivity is also very strategic. So it's unlikely that, despite the fact that there are several multilateral organizations functioning here, there is unlikely that there is a sense of region-ness that they would be able to come up with, because region-ness requires certain triggers, and those triggers are absent in this region as of now. Maybe if the politics of it changes, if then there are chances that we might have a project of cooperative security.
Very pertinent point, sir. But acknowledging the overall progress that have been made in the last decade or so, in carving out a niche for India in this BOP region, there still exists a lot of stumbling blocks, whether in the consolidation of multilateral bodies or even the strategic policy of India in the region. So, how would you identify these challenges, and more so, what are the ways out?
Yeah, one of the major problems is the fact that we have essentially faltered in terms of leading connectivity projects across the region. Okay, we have taken a lot of time in terms of building connectivity projects across the region. That is one thing in which the Chinese have gone leaps and bounds ahead of us. The second thing is that despite the fact that we have taken a lot of in-house projects, we have been not very good with timelines. We have not been very good with uh, projecting them in terms of fulfilling them, starting from Sagarmala to Project Mosam. Many initiatives have been taken, but those initiatives have thinned out with time. So that part has to be looked at. The third is something that doesn't really have a resolution outrightly, which is that how multilateral organizations will function here. Because, as I said, that despite the fact that we do not have a rivalry like India, Pakistan in the Bay of Bengal region, but neither that fact that these countries have a sense of cooperative security, be it Bangladesh, Myanmar, be it India, Myanmar, India, Bangladesh. Also, if you are saying that, what is the question of China, whether China is a resident power here or is it an extra regional power here? So we do not have a rivalry which is very magnanimous, but neither we have a very good understanding of political security which will bind together some sort of a community with regard to this region. So multilateral initiatives remain difficult. Connectivity at best will be here strategic. Connectivity at best will be political, which a lot of people avoid to look at it from that perspective. People look at connectivity from a very technical perspective, but connectivity is as political as it gets in this region. So the first problem that I see is that the problem of resources, the problem of managing those resources, and whether we are ready to punch above our weights and complement this region with regard to what we want in this region. And the second is that how do we want to structure this region? Do we want to hold our hands of the other states and come together to a consensus? Do we want to lead a spearhead in terms of cooperative security, at least when it comes to non-traditional security issues, things like that? That will be very crucial in terms of the future scenarios, and also how we manage our rivalry with China in these waters. That's also very important.
Absolutely, sir. That actually brings us to the end of this 10 minutes podcast. Thank you so much for being on the SAM conversation today, sir. It was so insightful and engaging. I hope it was the same for you. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
that.
much. It was lovely talking to you, and all the best to Satisha Monitor as well. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
sir.
much for having me.
We'll be hoping to speak with you soon again. Thank you, sir.